Great Escape. I'm CJ Peterson with my co-host, author Michael Scott Clifton. We're here with Kelly Lynn Colby, and we're going to be talking paranormal and psychic fiction. Ooh. But until we had that direction, which is great timing because of October, but until we had that direction, Mike, how was your week?
Had a great week. Concluded, as you well know, since you are one of the bloggers, the Lone Star Literary Life blog tour for my fourth and final book, Kelly Lynn, by the way, of the 1 million word manuscript. We do manage to condense it to 4 books. But anyway, the fourth and final book concluded the blog tour, and I had 10 review stops and got 9 5-star reviews and 1 4-star review. And the same week, I also got a 5-star review on Cavern of the Veil Queen from Reader's Favorite. So I was very well pleased. And as you well know, if you, you may not know this, Kelly, but I've commiserated with CJ. I'm finally finished with that series. I finally condensed that 1 million words to four books, and I think it came out just fine.
You knocked it out of the park. Right. I'm going to say that. Excellent. Because I started that blog tour, and you knocked that sucker out of the park.
Well, I appreciate it. It was a relief to get it done. This weekend, I will be at Hot Springs at the SpaCon, and Melanie and I are looking forward to that. It's going to be 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we hope to do really well. So far, it's been a great year, so looking forward. May get there a little early and do a little hot springing before we start with the do the little visitor things before we start the con.
There you go. So, Miss Kelly, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yourself, because not everybody knows who you are.
Hi, I'm Kelly Lynn Colby. I am a writer of paranormal thrillers and epic fantasies, and I'm the editorial director at Cursed Dragon Ship Publishing. And I also have 2 podcasts myself, so it's going to be very interesting to not be the interviewee in this case. So I shall try not to take over. CJ can handle me, though. It's fine.
Oh, it's all right. Trust me. I'm actually still doing a couple back end things. This weekend, actually, we were sick. We were trying to recover. Had that lovely allergy attack that's killing us. My poor daughter's over here coughing right now.
Or con crud from all the conventions you keep going to.
Well, yeah, but those are fun, so I'm not going to blame the conventions.
You can blame them and still love them. I do.
I don't want to, Mom. Yeah, it's been fun. My book launch on the 13th they did amazing. I was in some very high subjects like time travel fiction, all that type stuff. And it actually got within 100. It was within the top 100 on a lot of those. So I was very excited. I could not have been more happy on the launch. For those who don't know about it, it's Chain Reaction. It's a time travel fiction, and it's kind of a purpose butterfly effect. They go back in time to fix their family line. So I'm excited for that. And we have a new one coming out with Texas Sisters Press. Cindy Flo is going to be having a new launch on the 6th of October. And currently working on the anthology for Texas Sisters Press's Christmas holiday anthology. So I'm super excited about that. But we're here to talk psychic and paranormal fiction. And like I said, it's good timing because October is coming. Everybody likes to be freaked out a little bit. And honestly, your books do freak people out. So can you tell us a little bit about them?
Well, for the paranormal thrillers, the first one's called The Collector. And the series is Emergence.
This one I did review on Book World: The Great Escape, I think in February.
It sounds correct.
Yeah.
Earlier this year. That's what Google's for, right? They'll tell us.
Exactly.
But The Collector is a book about an empath who can sense people's emotions, and she can sense memories that are left on objects. So any really strong memory. So she can sense those as well. She thinks she's the only one who can do this. And then she discovers that an artist can probably also do the same thing. She's so excited, and she goes to meet him, and he's been murdered. And she might be next. So it's very exciting.
It's very creepy. So what got you into writing like psychic paranormal fiction? And how does that differ from other like mystery and stuff?
Well, I think the mystery part's pretty similar. Like it's almost like a like a procedural book, this one. It's very much like you get evidence, you know, bodies drop, and she's working her, she ends up meeting a police officer who kind of believes her. And then so they go through this whole thing, right? So it's very procedural. So the cool part is her abilities. So her ability is what set her off. And I think it just comes from boredom. Like it's very simple to just do. Okay, it's not. People do it all the time. There's hard things about it. But in my brain, I always complicate things. So instead of complicating it by making it like a big political statement, or, you know, making there be more bodies or something like that, I complicate it by making her stand out from everyone else and trying to figure out how she's going to fit in, because that gives me more interesting character. And what better way to explore that than have her have an ability that is impossible, but we all kind of think maybe, who knows, it could be
Kind of cool.
Right. So then hence I've just kind of explored both of the things. Like, why do humans think that would be cool? So of course she doesn't, right? Fauna Young is the character. She doesn't think it's cool at all.
Mm-hmm.
So until book 2,
we'll call it a gift. She would call it a curse.
She called it a curse. Until the beginning of book 2, she's decided it's a gift now.
Oh, and I cannot wait to get my hands on book 2.
So that'll be fun.
Now, part of mine are paranormal fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with like the spiritual realm crossing into the physical.
Mm-hmm.
There's dark, there's lights. They're dealing with them on this plane of existence, though, which is kind of a unique twist to it. And so it's like, what made you cross that boundary into the paranormal and psychic fiction?
I think it's just I was raised reading everything. Quite frankly, a lot of science fiction. Because in the 80s, that's what I had the biggest exposure to. So, you know, I read a lot of the classics, you know, Asimov and Heinlein and all of these, like a lot of us of our generation grew up reading. So I read a bunch of them. And if you go back and look at them, they're not science fiction. All of them are not science fiction in the way we would define them today. A lot of them have those kind of psychic elements, right? A lot of them have that exploring what could humans actually do. Mm-hmm. And so I think part of that just ingrained itself in my brain somewhere, and it just became something I wanted to explore more.
Gotcha. Now, how would it, I mean, when you do write it, you know, yours has that mystery twist to it because of the murders.
Yes.
So how does it differ from just a general murder?
If you look at the format, it's very similar. Mm-hmm. Like I literally, because I had written epic fantasy forever. And that is what I picked up after Heinlein. Like right after Heinlein, I'm now reading Stephen King and then Dragonlance. So that really guided what I wrote when I eventually sat down to write. Mm-hmm. It's very different. And I watch a lot of procedural stuff on TV, but writing's very different. And watching it doesn't necessarily mean you pick up what the tropes are. So I did a lot of research about, you know, how does this work? You know, when do you have to have a dead body? What clues need to be? And so I tried to, and I outlined it. I know you said you're a pantser, right? I am not. I am a very strict outliner, which works.
Give us hives.
Yes. Very strict outliner. And I will tell you, that is a strength when you're writing the mystery. Because then I can make sure the clues come out where they need to. I can make sure that things are dropped where they need to. I can, so that the reader is guided, but not surprised out of nowhere. Oh, here's the murderer, right? That's no fun. You want to kind of guess it when you're going through it. So you need to make sure you plant these things and guide the reader so that they have a fun experience. Even though for Fauna, it's not fun at all.
Well, I know. And it's almost like writing a game of, where you're playing the game of Clue, where it's process of elimination.
Yes, exactly.
So as you're writing the murder mystery, you know, she's doing the process of, well, it can't be this person because they were here, and it can't be that person because they were there. But it may be this person or this person or this person, only I'm not quite sure. But,
yep. And then in police procedurals, they do DNA tests and, you know, do other things. For her, she can actually sense these memories. So that's really the device we are using to find out what the truth is. So, and then just like the DNA test, just like the, you know, spectrometer and all the other stuff that they'll use, you have to interpret what it is that you're gathering. Well, she has to do the same thing. So it's just kind of a different means of gathering data.
Now, you mentioned that you do write fantasy. So you have like these huge fantastical settings and sort of stuff. But what was it like switching to the real world?
Oh, it was wonderful. Because not only did I use the real world, I just did Houston, right? I'm right outside of Houston. My husband and I, as soon as the kids are independent, they're adults now. We made it that far. As soon as they're independent, we are moving downtown. I love it down there. I love the food. I love the museums. I love the people, the diversity. I love it. So it was fun to just bring up the things that I love about Houston. And let's face it, some of the darker, seedier things too. And so that you could bring it up and explore in that way without me having to invent anything. I didn't have to make up streets. I know which one goes which way. And if I don't remember something, oh no, I have to go downtown. It's so sad. And you'll see on my covers, we have both the first and the second book, there is a picture of Houston on it, because Houston is one of the characters. You will see, if you are from Houston, you will see restaurants you've been to. And if you haven't, you need to go. Places you've been. The George R. Brown, I mean, we've all been there, right? With Comic Palooza and many different other things. She goes to a tech conference in book 2. And guess where it is? The George R. Brown. So we get to do a little bit of Edo, which is East Downtown. Mm-hmm. So basically, you're still exploring this awesome, incredible world, except all I have to do is copy it down. I don't have to make any of it up. And I will tell you, it's like a breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm. I know mine, I tend to do real world. So even in my paranormal one that I did, it was still real world, but it was like different parts of the world. So I still did my research, but it wasn't as difficult as, say, Mike's, where you created a whole new planet.
Right.
Yeah, I think that with fantasy, we've had this discussion before, but so much of fantasy is, you mentioned Heinlein, who's one of my favorite all-time science fiction authors, and Stephen King, The Stand, like one of my all-time favorite books. And I was thinking, when you were talking about the psychic and how they had aspects of that in science fiction, the classic Dune by Frank Herbert, and the Bene Gesserits and all of that. But one of the things with fantasy, I think, when I was growing up, it was probably the science fiction and fantasy was probably one of the most popular genres at that time. And over time, since then, the market for it and the readership began to shrink. About the same time, the books started getting wider and wider, and they became book stop, doorstop size. And again, we've had conversations about this, but I found it, interesting what you're saying about the real world aspect of what you're writing now, because I think with some of the books that I have tried to write, same way, in that I think that there are readers out there that would like fantasy, that've never read it before, new readers that would find it interesting. If you eliminated the extraneous matter and had some sort of real world connection where they could immediately identify with the character, the scene, the setting, et cetera, et cetera. And, paranormal is a perfect genre for that. But I think you can, that fantasy, subgenres, paranormal, urban fantasy, that sort of thing. I think there's, it sounds like you have made that leap to sort of connect the two, and congratulations for that, because I think that's awesome. I think that's what's needed to kind of bring fantasy, dragging from the, always in a parallel world where there's absolutely nothing that a person can relate to who never has read it before.
Well, and I think that's why Stranger Things does so well, because it has the 80s elements. So all the Gen Xers are like all over this.
Yes.
And then you've got the sci-fi fantasy and the fact that it's actually in the real world. And so it kind of helps to make things more relatable and when you're dealing with the real world.
Yes. Yep.
But when you're adding all of that stuff, it's like you can actually start to blend them together and make a recipe of sci-fi, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of psychic, a little bit of mystery, toss in a little bit of romance in there for fun. You can start to blend through the different genres, but you still have a hardcore start. You still have a hardcore target. But it's like it allows others who enjoy other genres to still enjoy it and still give them, a means of escape. And that's like my Sands of Time trilogy has to do with like teens with abilities. And so, and watching him kind of be manipulated with genetic manipulation and all of that. And it does kind of follow the psychic part, because there's like telekinesis, there's empaths, there's all sorts of things. And it's like, but it's under the umbrella of like a sci-fi. And so you can kind of blend them if you're really good at it. It's almost like a chef creating a new dish.
I think that's why urban fantasy is so popular too. Right. So
Yes.
it's like all these paranormal that's very popular. I think it's like a gateway drug to reading harder fantasy, right? Like this is like, we're just introducing you here.
This.
Right? Like I still have to have a magic system, right? Because I still have to have the way that their powers work, and that has to be consistent.
There's still
right?
rules of law. You still got to follow the rules of law.
And if I break them, there has to be a reason for that, right? Like, so you have to make sure that there is that. That's just like fantasy. So I have to have that. But like Detective Flores drives a Ford Fusion, I don't have to tell people what that is. Right? It's like, okay, I know what a Ford Fusion is. I get that. Where in fantasy, they're like, oh, they ride a wyvern, and people are like, what's a wyvern, right? So there's more to explain. So if you can get them in with that introductory without them having to learn everything, then it's very likely that they might take the next step to see, I wonder, what more do we have, so that they can actually go and start exploring other genres.
Exactly.
So do you think, Kelly, that those comments you made about that urban fantasy, paranormal, introduces new readers to a fantasy genre where you say harder fantasy, where you are talking about world building and that sort of thing? So they kind of take baby steps from the paranormal or the urban fantasy. I hadn't thought about that, but that's actually a good point. Really is.
My daughter, she loves paranormal romance. It's her favorite genre. She doesn't like regular romance. To her, it's a little too mundane, but she hasn't gone all the way into the big hardcore fantasy yet, because it's a little bit too much for her, right? It's too much for her to get on. It's too much. And let's face it, when it comes to this kind of stuff, we're reading to have fun and escape. So if it's too hard to get into it, why are we going to do that? And I don't blame readers for that at all. I'm like, no, you have to read this. No, you don't. If you read the first 2 pages, you're like, it's not for me. Great. There are billions of books out there. Pick up another one.
Yeah. For the paranormal one that I did, it's like there's 4 different series that are all kind of the characters' crossover storylines. So instead of having them dive into this entire world, I start them on one where it starts to kind of tiptoe it toward the end. It's kind of there, but you're like, what is that? But if there are some that are like, no, I totally love that thing. Great. Then you start on this series and you can backtrack here, but you're still within the same timeline. And so it's like, for those that, are kind of like a little leery of, will I like it? Will I not like it? Will I understand it? It's like, if you can take them on that slower journey, then they're like, okay, no, I get this. I get how that could be real. I get it.
Yeah. World building is taking up hundreds of pages, and you haven't, again, we've talked about this, and you haven't introduced a plot or characters. People who are hardcore fantasy might love it, but those who perhaps even like your daughter, it's a bridge too far. Give me something I can get into from the jump, and then maybe transition into that. So yeah, I understand that. I understand that completely.
Well, there's an interesting thing about reading. Like, if you read widely, it really does teach you empathy. But if you can't relate to any of the characters, you're not going to learn that empathy. You have to have someone that you can relate to.
Exactly. Boy, it's refreshing to hear somebody else say that, because I've thought that for a long time, with fantasy. That's in the Janus Witch, the novels I've tried to write. Janus Witch was my second book, and they start out in a medieval setting, but they end up in 21st century Texas. And so
that's quite a leap.
It is.
Yeah.
But it enables you to be able to relate to characters that you meet in everyday life without having to write 200 pages of world building before you get to that. And by then you've lost people who normally don't, who doesn't
They're
have
not going to wade through it.
No, they're not. So,
or ones that have like these personalities that are like too, too overused, like the ultimate bad guy or the athletic type person. It's like, bring them, make them have faults, make them have fears. That's why like Indiana Jones is so relatable. Yes, he's like a really cool dude, but he's terrified of snakes.
But he's also a trope now, so keep that in mind too. So every time you make something unique, it will eventually become a trope.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Use those darn tropes.
Start. And that's the thing, is that's what people loved about him. It's always like, why is it always snakes? And so if you can do something relatable to them where they do have their faults and they're not impenetrable, then that helps people relate to, like, oh, I know, I feel like that already. I get that. I get you. And they are hooked into the book because they want to see what this character does. And they're either cheering for them and hating other characters, or, loving them. If you can make them laugh and cry in the same book, that's always my goal.
Plus, if you can have a character who has these best friends, and so she's an empath, like a literal empath, not how where we talk about humans being empaths, right? Where she can sense these emotions and do this kind of thing. I'll describe a trope in just a minute, but where she can sense and touch these things, then what you have is, and she can tell her best friends, she can finally confess to them that she has these abilities, and they're like, huh, that explains a lot. Whatever, what's for dinner? Then when you have those kids, or even, let's face it, us older people who maybe didn't learn our lessons the way we should, and then we have whatever that we are hiding that we think is embarrassing, that we think no one will accept, and we can tell our best friends, right? Like, it's like, maybe you can actually trust them. It worked out, right? And so that you can learn from that and grow from that, even though it's this fantasy, even though it's this ridiculous thing, right? She can sense memories and objects. It's ridiculous.
It's the characters they follow.
But you feel separate, right? Like when all of us, we're like, we have lots of friends, we're together, we're like everyone else, and then we're by ourselves, we're like, oh my God, no one's like us. There is nothing, nobody, does anybody even think like I do? So, right, so when you see that there's somebody else who thinks the same thing in the book you're reading, I know, exactly. You're like, oh, I'm not the only one, thank God.
Like you mentioned playing D&D, I'm like, oh, my people, you got to get me into this.
That's right. I would play, it's too much fun. Yes, so it's awesome. Tropes, and Mombi wanted to know what a trope is. Tropes are different for every genre, and a trope is something that you see frequently in that genre that doesn't necessarily need an explanation. So you will see them over and over again. Like if we're going to talk for paranormal thrillers, right, or paranormal that we're going over now, what you're going to have is you're going to have some kind of psychic abilities in humans. They tend to only be humans in those stories, right? That's the trope. You don't have elves or dwarves, or usually, right? You don't have these other ones. Again, we're talking the trope, right? So, and then you have like human abilities that they can do. Another very popular trope is the more supernatural, which is right alongside with paranormal, where you have, gods and demons, right? So you have the trope between the god and the demon thing. And quite frankly, if you go back 400 years, the devil was always the evil one. And now in today's modern time, devil's always the misunderstood one, right? That's the new trope. So tropes also change over time, but the trope is something you don't have to explain so much, because as soon as you start reading it, you recognize it.
Yeah.
So, and you see people like, don't use tropes. No, you have to use tropes, because otherwise no one has any idea what you're reading. You just have to make sure you have, like CJ was saying, you have to have an interesting twist to it, right? You have to have something just a little bit different that sets it apart.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise it's liable to be cliche.
Right.
And you don't want that. You want something different. And you don't want to do the same curve that you do in every story. It's like, no, you need to toss it off to the side sometimes and just do something cool that they're not expecting.
Right.
So,
but that they would welcome.
Yes.
I've had some people go, oh, this is so cool. I'm like, yeah, your readers are going to have a fit. Let's talk for a minute.
You have to make sure to put yourself in the mind of the reader.
Yes, you have to think. I know we're artists and we're like, screw everyone else. I'm like, yeah, but you need to pay your mortgage, right? So let's talk for a minute.
There has to be a balance in there somewhere.
Yes, absolutely.
So we have a few minutes left. Is there some sort of nugget or something that you want to give somebody who may want to start to write, psychic fiction or paranormal fiction?
Read first. You need to read in the genre you want to write. I don't care what it is. So if paranormal fiction is what you want to write, which please, we could always use more, then read it. Read a bunch of it. It's one of the benefits to people like Amazon and Barnes & Noble breaking up the subjects to something really small. You can find them pretty easy now. And then just read. You've got to read first and then dive in and decide what you want to do.
Gotcha. Now, how can people find you online? Because you are actually not just an author, you're also a publisher.
I am. And actually, you can find me online a lot more through my publishing company. It takes up a lot more of my time. That is my day job, right? So that's all we know, right? We have day jobs, then we write when we can. That's me too, right? My day job is a publishing company. And it's called Cursed Dragon Ship Publishing. And we publish fantasy, sci-fi, and horror exclusively. And you can find that at curseddragonship.com. You can also follow us on Twitch. We stream a lot on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/curseddragonship. And we have Monday night Writing Wrongs, like W writing, and it's the D&D that CJ was talking about, and we're all writers on board, so we have a great time, and they're all on the Cursed Dragon ship as they're traveling, so it's really fun.
Now, can you explain the cursed? I get it, but some people might not get the cursed dragon ship part.
Yes, the curse. So cursed is for the horror, dragon is for the fantasy, and ship is for the spaceship, right? So the sci-fi. So it just kind of encompasses the stuff that we publish.
That's good.
And it took us a long time to come up with that. Let me just say, there was lots and lots of different things. And even when we first did it, wasn't sure I liked it, but it's definitely grown to me. I totally adore it now. And it definitely fits us. So, and then, yes. And we do 20 questions with your favorite author on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Central, also on Twitch. You can also go, if you've missed any of this, you could go to curseddragonship.com/YouTube. And you can see any of our old videos are up there. So we have lots of fun people. And everyone we interview, it's not just our authors, but it is only fantasy, sci-fi, and horror authors. So I think I need to get both of you on. I don't think you've been on yet.
Sure, yeah.
Hi.
Glad to.
Yeah. Well, we'll get you on there so we can get talking. You can be everyone's new favorite author.
I'm working on that. So really quick, what's next?
Next is book 2 in the Emergence series. So we talked about the collector. Book 2 is the healer. And Fauna thinks she's all good now. You know, her empathy, she gets it. It's a gift. It totally is. She's going to help solve old murders, right? With the Detective Flores. She's like, this is great. I have a mission now. And then her brother comes back into town. And her brother is the one who had her conning people when she was younger. So he's not exactly a good influence on her life. And when he shows up, also some murders have happened and there's strange sickness across the homeless population. She has no idea what's going on, but it can't be your brother. He can't be a murderer. Or is he? So that's what book 2 is.
Is there at any point do we find out how they got these gifts?
Maybe, but not yet. It's called Emergence. The story shall emerge as we go along.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Kelly.
Yes.
You're always
Thanks for inviting me.
You can find her at kellylynncolby.com. Morgan put on your super interesting interview today. Not a genre I typically look into, but I definitely have to check it out.
Thanks, Morgan.
So you can find her at kellylynncolby.com or curseddragonship.com. And for next week is our favorite week of the month, book review day.
Oh, yay!
What's next on our list for next week? 1 o'clock, same place you found us, same stations, Facebook, and either one of our YouTubes will work at 1 o'clock Central Time next Wednesday. We'll see you then. Bye.
Bye-bye.